What is up? Welcome to the episode. Today we are going to be chatting about hobbies. And I want to be super clear that this episode isn't just going to be me telling you about how you need to have active hobbies like hiking and working out. If you do or you'd like to implement those, that's great. But this episode is about more than fitness-specific hobbies and how they relate to fat loss as well as just enjoying your life. So, what floats your boat? What are the top 3 activities that when you do them, you completely lose track of time? You forget to eat, you might even forget to drink water, you might even not want to get up and go to the bathroom because it'll take you away from that task. You essentially lose yourself. Now you might be thinking, I don't have anything like that in my life right now, and that's okay. Throughout this episode, we're going to establish at the very least one of those things for you to explore. I was watching my 2 little nieces play the other day, and I've noticed a pattern in them. Mealtime is basically a burden because it takes them away from playing. They essentially look at eating like time that they could be spending doing more exciting things. Now, when they are eating, they enjoy it, they eat until they're satisfied, and then it's immediately back to play. So this got me thinking, when did we get away from this mentality? Because as adults, most things tend to revolve around food and drink instead of play. And sure, we have jobs, bills to pay, obligations, and responsibilities that children don't have. But how often are you just fully immersed in something to the point where everything other than that thing simply becomes a distraction? Now, don't get me wrong, eating and drinking are both great. I love food. I enjoy some alcohol here and there too. However, if those are your only or primary hobbies at the moment, staying healthy is likely going to be fairly difficult just because your free time is going to revolve around food and drink. There's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but when it's our sole source of enjoyment and we don't really have much of any other hobbies or interests, we tend to run into problems from a health and body composition standpoint because we simply overconsume. And as you're well aware, there are all sorts of downstream health consequences in regards to overconsumption. Again, your hobbies do not have to be active. They can be, but they don't have to be. The idea here is that we establish interests outside of food and drink specifically, and the quickest way to do this is to look at what you were interested in as a child. I'll use myself as an example. When I was younger, I loved to draw. I spent hours and hours drawing, and I think at one point I wanted to be an artist. So when I was originally looking into establishing some new hobbies, I started drawing a little bit as well as using an adult coloring book. And truth be told, it just didn't stick. It turns out that I'm not nearly as interested in drawing now as I was when I was younger. So I looked at some other things that I love to do, and one of the first memories that popped into my head was riding my bike. And it was an awesome serendipitous moment, I guess you could say, that an ex-girlfriend of mine was into road cycling, and I had never had a proper road bike. I just rode commuters and hybrids to get around a little bit in my adulthood at least. And after I road cycled for the first time, I absolutely fell in love with it. The idea that I could cover fairly large distances without a car, enjoying the scenery along the way, challenging myself physically, I loved it all. So I got the bike, I got the gear, the sunglasses, everything. And that was 5 or 6 years ago now, and I still love cycling with an absolute passion. And I'm super grateful for that ex-gal of mine because she sparked that childhood interest in cycling for me, and it really stuck. Cycling happens to be fitness related. However, even if it had no physical benefits, I'd still do it because it's really not about the fitness for me. That aspect is just an added bonus. So it's cool if your hobbies are active, or at least some of them are, because it's such an easy and fun way to stay healthy and fit. However, your passions are your passions, and they could be anything from pottery to playing an instrument to reading. It really doesn't matter what the thing is all that much, aside from food and drink most likely, just because the vast majority of us do not have a hard time implementing food and drink into our lives in the slightest. However, hobbies that we truly enjoy outside of that are a bit of a different story quite often. Now, it's worth mentioning that for some folks, the food and drink piece is just as much of a social interest as it is an eating and drinking interest. However, if you are running into issues around overconsumption, you can pivot your social stuff away from food and drink to a degree. For example, if normally you go for a restaurant meal and a few bevies with your friend or friends, maybe you grab coffee instead and you still fill your social bucket, but it doesn't come along with thousands of calories and a hangover potentially. If the bigger pull for you personally is a social one around food and drink, you can really easily transition just about anything to be a social thing. For example, cycling is social. Folks cycle in groups all the time and catch up while they're riding and enjoying the awesome landscape. I mentioned going for coffee. Hiking is another social option. Joining a sports team like soccer or baseball. A language exchange. Shit, you can just sit and have a conversation without food or drink occasionally. These are all social things that don't need to necessarily revolve around food and drink specifically, but still allow you to fill your social and community bucket. I've chatted about this concept of hobbies with quite a few of my clients, and oftentimes I'll ask them, what fills you that isn't food? Because there are tons of things that provide you with essentially nourishment that aren't in fact nutritional in nature. Cycling fills a part of me that food simply can't. It's the sense of adventure and exhilaration and exploration, but this excitement can really apply to anything that you're interested in or passionate about. If you dig gardening, how cool is the process of learning about new plants, how they grow, what they don't like, and then ultimately you get to enjoy the finished product via a beautiful flower or maybe even some fresh veg. If you like reading, how awesome is it to dig into a great book and be enthralled in that story? Or maybe it's even nonfiction and you're just fascinated by a certain topic. Perhaps you're reading about gardening and learning about it fulfills you, it lights you up and gets you going. Personally, that topic for me is nutrition and evolutionary psychology and just about everything that's related to the body, health, and body composition. I get high off of learning new things that I may be able to implement with clients or just have a better understanding about. Recently, I had a client get into mountain biking, and I could tell that it provided her with this huge spark. And she's got kids, she's got a job, she's got plenty going on in her life, but she found a way to implement something that excited her and essentially made her feel more alive. And that stuff trickles into every other area of your life. When we're learning and taking on new tasks or just doing things that we enjoy, it fulfills us in a way that food and drink can't. And you can tell when someone has a lot of life behind their eyes, right? You can tell when someone is feeling inspired. Everybody's seen it and understands it. So the question becomes, if you're not feeling it, how can you access it? A classic sign that you may not have enough going on in your life from a hobby standpoint is, like I mentioned, if everything tends to revolve around food and drink and or you feel bored quite often. Boredom often leads to overeating now that food is so abundant, because if we don't have anything to do, it's like, shit, I'll just walk over to the fridge and get something to eat with no thought of, am I even hungry right now? Hobbies can help you with your fitness goals, even if they're not active ones, because like I mentioned, they fill you. They're sort of like nutrition for your soul, as fucking corny as that sounds, but it's true. So here is the formula. Ask yourself, what floats my boat? If nothing comes up, look back to your childhood and what you were interested in then and start trying things. The what isn't all that important. The key is that you enjoy and you play. And if you're still having a hard time, look at your bucket list. What items are on there? For example, learning Spanish was on my bucket list for ages, and I finally took the plunge about 2.5 years ago, and now I can speak Spanish. It's not perfect, and I still take lessons once per week, and when I'm living in a Spanish-speaking country, I'm building on that skill via immersion and practice, and it's been so fun. It's been super challenging and frustrating at times as well, but overall, it's really added to my life. If you try something and it doesn't click, move on. Give something else a go until you find something that fits and that you're excited about. If you pick up a hobby for a month, a year, 5 years, 10 years, that's cool. When you're over it, you'll know. Just be sure that you replace it with something else because you're still going to need to scratch that hobby itch. Basically, the take-home message here is that there are so many ways to satisfy the cravings in your life that don't necessarily involve food. If you're interested in applying for one-on-one nutritional coaching and or workout design with me, you can click the link in the description below or head on over to n1fitness.com/coaching. Follow me up on Instagram at N1Fitness, and feel free to friend me on Facebook at Marcus Sadu. Leaving an iTunes review really helps the pod grow and reach more folks. So if you're willing to do that, I truly appreciate it. And if you've already left a review, thank you so much. Lastly, be sure to hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you're using. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I will catch you on the next episode. See ya.